The prison where you're already dead. There's a place in America where the sun barely reaches. A place so secret, so terrifying, that even hardened criminals fear its name. It sits quietly in the mountains of Colorado, looking almost peaceful from the outside. But inside? Inside is a different story. This is ADX Florence. And if you're sent here, you're already dead. Now, you might be thinking, wait, isn't death row supposed to be a place where people wait for execution? Well, that's what makes this story so strange. ADX Florence wasn't built to be a death row prison. It was built for something else entirely, something that might be even worse. If you want to know the darkest secrets of America's most dangerous prison, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what you're about to hear will change how you see justice forever. And drop a comment below. Have you ever heard of ADX Florence before? Let's go back to 1995. The United States had a problem, a serious problem. Regular prisons couldn't hold certain inmates anymore. These weren't just regular criminals. These were people who had killed guards, people who kept running massive criminal organizations from behind bars, people who had tried to escape multiple times and almost succeeded. The government needed a solution, so they built ADX Florence, tucked away in Fremont County, Colorado. The official name is the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility, but everyone just calls it ADX Florence, or the Alcatraz of the Rockies. From the outside, it looks like just another concrete building in the desert. Nothing special, nothing scary. That's exactly what they wanted, because the real terror isn't what you can see, it's what you can't see. Here's where things get interesting. When ADX Florence opened, it could hold about 490 inmates. But here's the twist. They don't want it full. In fact, having too many people there is considered a failure. Because ADX Florence isn't meant to hold regular criminals. It's meant to hold the worst of the worst. The people who are too dangerous for any other prison in America. So who exactly ends up here? That's where our story gets really dark. Let's just say some names might surprise you, but we'll get to that later. First, you need to understand what life inside ADX Florence actually looks like. Imagine waking up in a concrete box. The walls are concrete. The floor is concrete. The bed is concrete. Even the desk and stool are made of poured concrete. The room is 7 feet wide and 12 feet long. That's smaller than most people's bathrooms. There's one window, but here's the cruel part. It's designed so you can't see outside. You can't see the mountains. You can't see the sky. You can't see anything except a tiny sliver of light, just enough to know whether it's day or night. That's it. Now, here's what your day looks like. You wake up in this concrete box. You spend 23 hours there, alone, completely alone, no cellmate, no visitors walking by, nothing but silence and concrete. For 1 hour, you get to leave. They take you to another concrete box. This one is slightly bigger. It's called a recreation cell. You can walk around. You can do push-ups. But you're still alone. Still surrounded by concrete walls. Still unable to see the outside world. The food comes through a slot in the door. You never see who brings it. You eat alone. You sleep alone. You exist alone. Some people spend years like this. Some spend decades. Now, you might be wondering, isn't this torture? Well, that's a question a lot of people have asked. The United Nations has said that keeping someone in solitary confinement for more than 15 days can be considered torture. At ADX Florence, some inmates have been in solitary for over 20 years, but the government says it's necessary. These aren't regular criminals, they argue. These are extremely dangerous people who have proven they can't be kept in regular prisons safely. So who are these people? Let's talk about some of the residents of ADX Florence. And trust me, when you hear these names, you'll understand why this place exists. There's Joaquin N. El Chapo Guzman N. You might have heard of him. He was the leader of the Sinaloa cartel, one of the most powerful drug organizations in the world. El Chapo didn't just sell drugs. He built tunnels under the border. He bribed entire police forces. And most importantly, he escaped from maximum security prisons. Twice. Once through a tunnel that had lights, ventilation, and even a motorcycle on rails. When Mexico sent him to the United States, there was only one place secure enough to hold him, ADX Florence. There's Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, the Boston Marathon bomber. In 2013, he and his brother set off bombs at the finish line of the Boston Marathon, killing 3 people and injuring hundreds more. He's here, in the concrete boxes, waiting. There's Terry Nichols, who helped plan the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. That attack killed 168 people, including 19 children. He's here too. There are terrorists connected to Al-Qaeda and the September 11th attacks, gang leaders who ran operations that killed dozens, spies who sold American secrets to foreign governments, people who killed prison guards and other inmates, people who, if given any chance, would kill again. These are the neighbors in ADX Florence, and they will probably never meet each other, because isolation is the point. But here's where our story takes its first major turn. Remember how I said ADX Florence wasn't originally built as a death row prison? Well, that changed. Recently, very recently. In December 2024, something historic happened. President Joe Biden was about to leave office. Before he left, he made a controversial decision. He commuted the sentences of 37 federal death row inmates. That means he changed their punishment from death to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now, some people supported this decision. They believe the death penalty is wrong, no matter what the crime. Others were furious. The families of victims felt betrayed. They had waited years, sometimes decades, for justice, and now it was being taken away. But here's the part that makes this story even more complicated. Where do you put 37 of the most dangerous criminals in America when they're no longer on death row? You can't just put them in regular prisons. These are people who committed the most heinous crimes imaginable. Multiple murders, killings of children, torture, acts so terrible that society decided they should die for them. The answer? ADX Florence. But this created a new problem, a problem that nobody saw coming. And this is where things get really interesting. Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed, because the next part of this story involves a president's executive order, a legal battle, and a question nobody wants to answer. Is living in ADX Florence worse than death itself? Drop a comment with your thoughts so far. When those 37 inmates were transferred to ADX Florence, something strange happened. People who had been celebrating the commutations suddenly went quiet, because they realized something. These prisoners weren't being saved from death. They were being sent to something that might be worse. Let me paint you a picture of what these inmates now face. They wake up in their 7 by 12-foot concrete cell. They know they will die here, not from execution, but from old age, or disease, or the slow breakdown of their own mind. There's no hope of release, no possibility of parole, no chance of seeing the outside world again. Just concrete walls, silence, and decades stretching ahead like an endless tunnel with no light at the end. Some inmates at ADX Florence have said they would prefer execution. Think about that. They would rather die than continue living in isolation. There have been at least 8 or 9 suicides at ADX Florence over the years. Inmates who couldn't take it anymore, who found ways to end their own lives despite being watched constantly, despite having almost nothing in their cells that could be used as a weapon, despite knowing that even in death, they would still be inside these walls. The psychological effects of this kind of isolation are severe. Inmates start talking to themselves. They hear voices that aren't there. They lose track of time, of reality itself. Some start mutilating themselves, just to feel something, anything other than the endless nothing of isolation. Lawsuits have been filed. Doctors have testified. Mental health experts have warned that this kind of confinement breaks human minds in ways that can never be repaired. The American Civil Liberties Union has called it cruel and unusual punishment. Amnesty International has condemned it. But ADX Florence continues operating, because the question remains, what else do you do with people this dangerous? Then, in January 2025, something else happened. Something that made the situation even more complex. Donald Trump became president again, and one of his first actions was to sign an executive order. This order demanded that the 37 commuted death row inmates be held in the harshest conditions possible. The order specifically mentioned ADX Florence. It demanded these inmates be kept in extreme isolation. It demanded they have almost no contact with the outside world. It essentially demanded they be treated as if they were already dead. But here's the twist. The Bureau of Prisons, the agency that actually runs federal prisons, has its own rules. And those rules say that solitary confinement should only be used when absolutely necessary. It should be limited. It should be reviewed regularly. It shouldn't be used as punishment, but only as a last resort for safety. So now, we have a standoff. A president ordering harsh treatment, prison officials bound by their own policies, and 37 inmates caught in the middle, living in concrete boxes, wondering if their lives will get even worse. Some of these inmates have been at ADX Florence for months now. They've experienced the isolation, the silence, the endless sameness of each day, and they're starting to understand something that other ADX inmates learned long ago. When you're sent to ADX Florence, you don't get a death sentence. You get something that might be crueler. You get life. A long, slow, isolated life where every day feels the same. Where hope dies not in an instant, but gradually, painfully, over years and decades. The concrete walls don't just hold your body, they hold your mind, your sanity, your humanity, and slowly, quietly, those walls squeeze tighter and tighter until there's nothing left but a shell of who you used to be. This is ADX Florence. This is where the most dangerous people in America are sent. Not to die quickly, but to fade away slowly, forgotten by the world, buried alive in concrete and silence. But the story doesn't end here. There are more secrets buried in those walls, more questions that need answers, more darkness waiting to be revealed. What happens to a human mind after 20 years of isolation? How does the prison maintain control over people who have nothing left to lose? And is there anyone who has ever left ADX Florence and returned to the outside world? The answers might surprise you, they might disturb you, but they will definitely make you question everything you thought you knew about justice, punishment, and what it means to be human. Let me tell you about a man named Thomas Silverstein. His story will help you understand just how extreme ADX Florence really is. Silverstein was a prisoner who killed 3 people while already in prison, including 2 guards. He was considered so dangerous that he spent 36 years in solitary confinement. 36 years. That's longer than many people's entire lives. For the last years of his life, Silverstein was kept in a special unit where guards wouldn't even speak to him. They would communicate only through written notes passed under his door. No human voice, no conversation, just silence and paper. Silverstein once said something chilling. "This is far much worse than death. The public doesn't understand. It's driving me insane." He died in 2019, still in prison, never having experienced freedom or normal human contact for over 3 decades. And here's what makes this relevant. Silverstein's level of isolation is now the daily reality for hundreds of inmates at ADX Florence. What was once considered an extreme punishment for the absolute worst case is now standard procedure. But how does ADX Florence actually keep these dangerous people contained? How do they prevent escapes, riots, or violence? The answer is both fascinating and terrifying. First, the building itself is a masterpiece of security engineering. There are approximately 1,400 remotely controlled steel doors. That's not a typo. 1,400 doors, each one controlled electronically from a central command center. An inmate cannot simply overpower a guard and run. Every single door between them and freedom is locked electronically. The walls aren't regular concrete. They're reinforced with steel bars. The windows, what few there are designed to prevent anyone from seeing out or communicating with the outside world. Even the air vents are too small for a human to fit through. 12 gun towers surround the facility. Armed guards watch every angle, every approach. Motion detectors cover the grounds. Pressure-sensitive pads detect any weight placed on them. Attack dogs patrol the perimeter. Laser beams create invisible barriers that trigger alarms if broken. And here's the really clever part. Even if an inmate somehow got out of their cell, they would still be lost. The prison is designed like a maze. Corridors look identical. There are no signs pointing to exits. No windows to orient yourself. Just endless concrete hallways that all look the same. An escaping inmate would be running blind, setting off alarms, with locked doors at every turn. In the entire history of ADX Florence, from 1995 to today, there has never been a successful escape. Not one. Not even a serious attempt that came close. That's how secure this place is. But security isn't just about walls and doors. It's about breaking the spirit. It's about making sure inmates never have the opportunity, the resources, or even the mental clarity to plan an escape. Remember that 1 hour of recreation time I mentioned? Here's what they don't tell you. That recreation cell is just another concrete box. It's slightly bigger, yes, but there's no equipment, no basketball hoop, no weights, nothing. You can pace. You can do exercises using your own body weight. That's it, and you're still alone. Always alone. Communication with the outside world? Severely limited. Phone calls are rare and heavily monitored. Visits are even rarer. And when visits do happen, they're non-contact. You sit in a booth. Your visitor sits in another booth. You talk through a phone while looking at each other through thick glass. No touching. No hugs. No human warmth. Letters are allowed, but every single word is read by prison staff. Anything suspicious, anything that could be code, and the letter is rejected. You can receive books, but only directly from publishers. Someone can't just send you a book from their home. It has to come sealed from a publisher, inspected for contraband. Some inmates go years without any visitors at all. Their families give up. The journey to rural Colorado is too far, too expensive, too emotionally draining. So the inmates are left with nothing but memories that slowly fade in the unchanging present. Now, you might be thinking, clearly some people must leave ADX Florence, right? It can't be a life sentence for everyone, and you'd be right. Some inmates do leave, but their stories are not happy ones. There's a step-down program at ADX Florence. If you follow all the rules, if you cause no trouble, if you show you can handle limited human contact, you might be moved to a slightly less restrictive unit. Then, after more good behavior, to another prison entirely. But here's the problem. After years of complete isolation, many inmates can't handle normal prison life anymore. They've been alone for so long that being around other people causes panic attacks. They've lost their social skills. They can't have normal conversations. Some have become so institutionalized that they can only function in isolation. There are documented cases of inmates who were released from ADX Florence to regular prisons and couldn't cope. They would attack other inmates or guards, just to be sent back to isolation. Because isolation, as terrible as it is, had become the only thing they understood, the only thing that felt safe. Think about that. Years of isolation had rewired their brains so completely that freedom, even the limited freedom of a regular prison, was more terrifying than being locked alone in a concrete box. And what about those who actually get released into society? That's extremely rare from ADX Florence, but it has happened. A few inmates have served their sentences and walked out into the world. These men describe the experience as overwhelming. Colors seem too bright. Sounds are too loud. Being in a room with multiple people causes anxiety. Making simple decisions, like what to eat or what to wear, becomes paralyzing because for years, every single aspect of their lives was controlled. One former ADX inmate described going to a grocery store for the first time after release. He stood in the cereal aisle for 20 minutes, unable to choose. Too many options. Too much stimulation. He had a panic attack and had to leave. Another described being unable to sleep in a normal bed. It felt too soft, too open. He ended up sleeping on the floor in a corner, facing the door, just like in his cell. Years later, he still couldn't break the habit. These are the invisible scars of ADX Florence. The damage you can't see, but that never really heals. If this story is opening your eyes to something you never knew existed, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. Should places like ADX Florence exist? Is this justice, or is it torture? I want to hear your thoughts. Now, let's talk about something that makes this whole situation even more complicated. The mental health crisis inside ADX Florence is real, documented, and growing worse. Class action lawsuits have been filed by inmates and their lawyers. These lawsuits include testimony from psychiatrists who have examined ADX inmates. The findings are disturbing. Inmates develop severe mental illnesses at much higher rates than in regular prisons. Depression, anxiety, paranoia, hallucinations. Some start hearing voices. Some see things that aren't there. Some lose the ability to tell what's real and what isn't. There are documented cases of self-mutilation. Inmates who cut themselves, bang their heads against concrete walls, or swallow dangerous objects, not to kill themselves necessarily, but just to feel something, to break the monotony, to prove to themselves that they still exist. The medical staff at ADX Florence is supposed to monitor for these issues. But here's the problem. How do you treat someone's mental illness when the cause of that illness is the very conditions they're living in? You can give them medication. You can have therapy sessions through the slot in their door. But you can't fix the fundamental problem, which is the isolation itself. Some mental health experts argue that ADX Florence creates mental illness in previously healthy people. They point to inmates who entered the facility psychologically normal and, within months or years, developed severe psychiatric problems. The prison administration disputes this. They argue that these inmates were already dangerous, already disturbed. The isolation, they say, is necessary to protect guards and other inmates. But the lawsuits continue, the evidence piles up, and the question remains, at what point does punishment become torture? The United Nations has weighed in. They've said that prolonged solitary confinement, anything beyond 15 days, can constitute cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. By that standard, ADX Florence is in violation with almost every single one of its inmates, but the United States government doesn't accept that assessment. They argue that ADX Florence is necessary, that these inmates are too dangerous for any other option, that the security of guards and other prisoners must come first. And so the concrete boxes remain occupied. The isolation continues. The years pile up like layers of sediment, burying these men deeper and deeper into darkness. Let me tell you about the daily routine in more detail, because understanding the mundane horror is important. Every day is exactly the same. Exactly the same. You wake up when the lights come on. You don't control the lights. They're on a timer, controlled remotely. You eat breakfast from a tray slid through the slot in your door. The food is bland but edible. You eat alone, at your concrete desk, on your concrete stool. You might read if you have a book. You might exercise in the tiny space of your cell. Push-ups, sit-ups, pacing the 7 feet back and forth, counting steps to pass the time. Then lunch comes through the slot. You eat. More reading, more exercises, more pacing. The window shows you whether it's sunny or cloudy, but you can't feel the sun. You can't feel the wind. You're sealed away from nature, from weather, from the world. Your 1 hour of recreation arrives. Guards escort you, shackled, to the recreation cell. You're unshackled inside. The door locks. You're alone again, but in a slightly bigger box. You can jog in circles. You can do more exercises. You can shout if you want, though no one will answer. Then the hour ends. Back to your cell. Dinner through the slot. More reading, more exercises, more pacing. The lights dim on schedule. You sleep on your concrete bed with its thin mattress. Then you wake up and do it all again. Day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. Some inmates mark time by growing their hair and beard, then cutting it, then growing it again. Others try to track days by scratching marks into their concrete walls, though this is against the rules. Many simply lose track entirely. Days blur together into an endless sameness. There's a phrase that keeps coming up when people talk about ADX Florence, a clean version of hell. The prison is spotless, well maintained, climate controlled. You're not physically tortured. You're not beaten. You're not starved. But you're slowly, methodically broken down by the absence of everything that makes us human. No conversation, no touch, no nature, no privacy cameras watch you constantly, no choices, no control, no hope. And for those 37 death row inmates who were recently transferred here, this is their future, not for a few years, forever, until they die of old age or disease, surrounded by concrete, having spent decades without meaningful human contact, some people argue this is exactly what they deserve. These are people who committed horrific crimes. People who murdered children, who tortured victims, who showed no mercy. Why should they receive mercy now? Others argue that no matter what someone has done, this level of punishment degrades all of us. That a society should be judged not by how it treats its best citizens, but by how it treats its worst. There's no easy answer, no clear right or wrong, just concrete walls and difficult questions. The story of ADX Florence is still being written. More inmates arrive. Some die there. The lawsuits continue. The debates rage on. And deep in the mountains of Colorado, in a building that looks almost peaceful from the outside, hundreds of men sit alone in concrete boxes, counting the days, losing track of time, slowly fading from the world. This is ADX Florence, the prison where hope goes to die, the place where America sends its most dangerous criminals, not to execute them, but to make them wish they had been executed instead. It's been called America's most secure prison, the final stop for the worst of the worst, a necessary evil, a human rights violation. Depending on who you ask, it's either essential justice or institutionalized torture. But one thing is certain, once you're sent to ADX Florence, you're already dead. Not in body, but in every way that matters. Dead to the world. Dead to human connection. Dead to hope. The concrete walls make sure of that. And that is why some say ADX Florence death row is not about dying fast. It's about disappearing slowly, knowing that whatever truth you carried will never leave those walls. If the story made you think differently about justice, betrayal, and silence, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you're ready to step into another case where the truth hides in plain sight, make sure you don't miss what comes next.